Hello, I'm coming at you from beautiful Lake Tahoe, California. If you're from California, or maybe you're not from California and you've been here, you know it's absolutely gorgeous. I would show you the lake, but I had the best sound in here. So we're going to talk today about yoga. And essentially, I want to give you an introduction to yoga and the way that I approach yoga, the practice of yoga, the practice of mindfulness and meditation, and how I'm going to be weaving somatic trauma resolution, stress reduction into the practice for you so that you are able to utilize the practice for your highest good. So I'm going to be talking about that and how we're going to approach that. So I'm honored, number one, to share these practices with you. I made it a point to study with the foremost yoga masters that I could find in the West and in the East, in New York City, Los Angeles, and in India. And I wanted to share more about this with you so that you can understand, again, the approach that we're going to be taking and why. So the physical asana practice is designed to help you prepare the body for meditation. So there are two reasons that we practice physical asana. Asana meaning the physical yoga postures, the yoga moves, as some people would call them, which is not accurate, but they're yoga postures that we put the body into, like warrior one, down dog, up dog, things like that. So there's two reasons we practice physical asana practice. One, for radiant health, and two, to prepare the body and mind to sit in meditation. So it's not about achieving advanced poses. That's not the ultimate goal. So while your practice is likely to deepen as you study with me, that's again not the ultimate goal. The catch here, however, is that we need to be fully embodied. What's our favorite word in the Find Your Freedom method? Embodiment, right? We need to be fully embodied before we start practicing more advanced esoteric mindfulness, meditation, breath work, and physical asana practice. This is why stress and trauma healing and yoga and mindfulness don't always mix. Yoga and mindfulness are not inherently trauma informed. So this applies to any of us who have stuck stress responses or recurring emotional patterns that are difficult to shift. Pretty much most of the population fits this bill. And again, what's our favorite word in the Find Your Freedom method? Embodiment, right? We need a sense of embodiment, which if you need to go back and remind yourself what that means, go back to the intro to the Find Your Freedom method video in week 1, right? We need a sense of embodiment in order for the yoga and meditation practices to be effective. We definitely cannot become enlightened or find ultimate freedom beyond a certain point without a connection to and a healing of the body. Right? I'm going to say that again. We cannot find freedom beyond a certain point without a connection to and healing of the body. Our karmic patterns and imprints live in our tissues, our fascia, our bones, cartilage, muscles, organs, cells, mitochondria. So to think that we can separate psychology, somatics, yoga and mindfulness and spirituality is a misnomer. It's just not true. We cannot separate these things out. Because as you start to deepen into the somatic work, right, you're going to start to release karmic patterns, karmic imprints, the things that are stuck in the body, right? Which is what we've been talking about. The Buddha's methodology for enlightenment has been passed down for over 2,500 years through the practice of Vipassana meditation. You need to go there. You need to go to a Vipassana retreat to receive that teaching in full. But what I will say is that the bulk of the practice is essentially scanning the body over and over again and watching what arises. The Buddha taught that we want to be aware of craving and aversion, that we will want to tend toward liking or preferring things about our experience and disliking or rejecting parts of our experience. And in many ways, What he taught is to allow what's happening inside of you to happen and observe without judgment. This is almost identical to the initial practices in somatic experiencing and what I'll be teaching you in the Find Your Freedom method. But in somatic experiencing and the Find Your Freedom method, we are slowing that experience way down so that we can learn to do so in a gentle, safe, titrated way, or in baby steps, essentially. We need to be able to stay with our experience and stay in the body before we can effectively practice yoga and meditation. Now, I'm going to be weaving these together, right, for you so that you can learn yoga in a way, again, that is titrated and incorporates this somatic practice into it. Okay. So there's a pattern that I and many of my colleagues in the psychology field see, that folks who tend to leave their bodies or leave their experience tend to be, not always, but tend to be the same people who are attracted to yoga, meditation, and psychedelics. Because there's a way that they can leave their experience that can actually feel better for them, because it's what they're used to, it's the way that they've coped for most of their lives, right? So it naturally is going to feel good to them, but it's actually only exacerbating the deeper internal issues they might already be having. Okay. So they're trying to heal themselves and are well-intentioned, but can lack an embodied sense of who they are. I mean, I was one of these people. I went to a Posner meditation retreat, and it was excruciatingly difficult. It was excruciatingly difficult because I had so much unresolved trauma, and I was leaving my experience so much in my life that to then have to sit in my body for 10 hours a day was way too much. Okay. And the way that dissociation and disconnection work, you don't realize you're leaving or disconnecting when you are, right? So we have to be aware of that and be aware of how that might be showing up. We might not realize, like if it's excruciatingly difficult for you to be in your body, like when I invite you into notice sensation, notice how you're feeling, notice your emotions. If that is difficult or you don't even feel sensation, that is a sign that you have a pattern, most likely, of dissociation and disconnection. Okay. And that being in the body for you needs to happen in a slow, gentle way over a long period of time. Okay. So, otherwise, you're just blasting the system open, and it's not appropriate. It's actually re-traumatizing, and it's not going to help you heal. It's only going to make things worse. Okay. So the somatic practices I'm going to be teaching you begin with this skill of starting to approach the body. Now, everybody's going to be different in terms of their ability to tune in, and that's okay if it's difficult for you or if it's not, and everywhere in between. But we then need to continue to address the stuck defensive responses and trauma that's locked in the body. When I sat that 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat, it was so difficult because I still had a ton of unresolved trauma at that time. And it was legitimately harder than the half Ironman triathlon I completed in college. And I wasn't ready, but I didn't know that. And I was just doing my best, right? So what I needed, and didn't know it at the time, was that I needed somatic work, and I needed to heal a lot of things inside me before I was ready to stay with that experience. So back to this idea of craving and aversion. So being a beginner is not better than being advanced, and vice versa. we're not looking to become the most advanced practitioner and know everything. It's an embodied sense of healing. So another way of looking at this is the many of these meditation practices or meditative mindfulness practices, including the physical practice of asana, they're relatively easy to find these days, and they're not appropriate for everyone right away. The yoga practices I'm going to be teaching you are going to help you build your ability to be in the body in a safe way without having to leave your experience. And I will also be teaching you to go into the postures a certain percentage of the way. So this helps people to stay in their bodies. And it's a reminder that it's not always the goal to go fully into the posture and push as hard as you can. Sometimes the deepest practice is to go into the posture 10%, track sensation, and stay with that experience for maybe 30 seconds. And then you come out. This is titration. Come in and step out. Come in a little bit more and step out. Take a break. It's like the waves of the ocean, right? They're not always pushing forward. That wouldn't make sense. We were pushing. It waxes and it wanes. The moon does the same. We go in and we come out. Inhale, exhale. Tide comes in, tide comes out. So the more you play with this, and I'll continue to teach you how to do this in our yoga practices, the more you're going to be able to go into the practice, stay with your experience, learn to be in the body in a safe way, and come out. Okay, so this is not, again, this is also not about constantly being in the body all the time. No, actually, it's okay if I kind of left myself there. Oh, okay, notice that and come back. It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same teaching in meditation of, oh, there's a thought. You kind of lost yourself there in thought. Now just come back to the breath. It's the same, right? This teaching is the same in almost every tradition. The Buddha was teaching it 2,500 years ago as the path to enlightenment. And now we understand it through Western psychology. We're just catching up to the Buddha, right? In this beautiful way. It's so exciting because now this is exactly what we're doing in somatic experiencing. And if you do yoga and meditation in an appropriate, psychologically trauma-informed way, you'll be doing it in a way that's actually healing for you, not exacerbating the same kind of dissociation, out of body thing that a lot of people in the yoga community tend to do. Okay. I think this is why many people in that kind of community, and I'm in that community, but I also am not in the same way. There's this place where people go of they're just not grounded. Remember, we're going back to Sthira and Sukha in our first video, in our first lesson. Sthira, Sukha. We need grounding in order to expand. And again, many people are turned off by the practice of yoga because they see these people who are kind of like, oh, they're not there. Or people, I went to graduate school with a woman who was doing ayahuasca every other weekend, sometimes every weekend. Her eyes, it was like nobody was home. Okay, that's not the goal. This is not where we're going. The goal is not to be above everybody else and transcend everybody else and be out of your body. That is not the goal. That is not integration, and it's not healthy. So I want to just be very clear about this for us and how I'm going to be approaching this practice for you. This is not woo-woo yoga. No, this is psychologically, neurobiologically, trauma-informed yoga practice that's also very reverent to the ancient teachings, what the Buddha was teaching, what they were teaching in the Vedas in India thousands of years ago. So we're bringing it together in this seamless, way that will, my hope is that it's deeply healing for you, and it opens you up, if especially if you're new to yoga, or even like, oh, I don't want to do yoga, I don't want to be like that, right? That there's this new way that you can kind of come into this practice. Okay. So again, this is the physical practice of titration, again, going in a little bit, coming out, that we teach in somatic experiencing, but in a yoga context. So this in many ways makes the Find Your Freedom method yoga so different from most of the yoga that's being taught out there, because we're combining, again, ancient, ancient, traditional, very powerful yoga practices. And as a side note, we'll get into Christ consciousness and Buddha consciousness, but Christ consciousness, there's a period of time that that Jesus Christ was in India, learning from the rishis there, learning yoga. Okay. And so these practices are very intertwined, and we're combining these ancient practices with modern day neuroscience, polyvagal theory, and somatic experiencing. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to be teaching you is chanting and mantra. It was one of the first yoga practices that I learned, right? So you're starting to hear, I'm not saying that the physical practice, the physical asana practice is the only part of yoga. No, there's a lot of yoga, a lot of limbs of yoga, and mantra and chanting are one of them. They're just as important, if not more, to cultivate a sense of devotion to the divine, a sense of devotion to universal consciousness that exists within you and me and in every living thing and in every cell and every atom of this entire experience we're in. And so even if you don't believe in a God per se, there is this reverence to the interconnectedness of all things. And that is where the word yoga comes from. It comes from the root word of yuj, which means to yoke or to bind, to connect. So when we are practicing yoga when we are deeply aware of our connectedness to all things, everywhere, in every way, at every moment. Okay. And so the chanting and the mantra help to start to teach us this at a deeper level. And I'm deeply grateful to my teacher, Saul, for introducing me to the depth and breadth of the chanting and mantra practice. It got me through debilitating grief in my early 20s. If you know my story, you know what I'm talking about. It was such a healing force for me. And it was such a catalyst early on in my spiritual journey and my healing journey. So I'm going to be sharing what I feel is important for you to understand about what certain mantras mean. And other times it's less important that you know what they mean, and more important for you to feel more of the felt sense or the essence of the mantra. And then to also honor the Sanskrit. I'm going to be using Sanskrit and English in the practice to honor where this practice comes from, which is India and Nepal. Okay. It's very important to me that we are not culturally appropriating an ancient Eastern practice into something that is akin to gym yoga that strips the physical practice from its roots. It's not appropriate, and that's not yoga. I have been initiated into these practices by my teacher. It's not that I just went to a yoga teacher training and paid money for this knowledge. No, I was initiated into the lineage of my teacher and his teacher and his teacher and his teacher and so on and so forth. And I take that honor, I take that responsibility, hold that responsibility with deep reverence. So I will be using the Sanskrit to honor the culture. We will not be removing the physical practice from the spiritual practice of yoga. And again, my intention there is to minimize any cultural appropriation that could occur. Okay. Also, the Sanskrit syllables correspond with different parts of the body and open up and clear different energy centers in the body. So even if you just chant the Om with me and then listen to the other mantras and learn them over time, that's wonderful. Okay. Doing the Om 3 times a day is so good for you. Remember, going back to the vagus nerve, humming, singing, chanting are wonderful ways to tone the vagus nerve. So the Om is one of the best practices for trauma healing. Okay. So I want to remind, so there's a reminder here from Helen Keller that I saw recently. And she said, a happy life consists not in the absence, but in the mastery of hardships. That is what we're here for in the Find Your Freedom method, to learn mastery over the joys and the hardships of life and to stay connected to our experience throughout or no matter what happens, right? So it's not about going towards something or away from something. It's just being with and allowing. So I want to remind you that wherever you are is where you're meant to be. Wherever you are right now in this practice, in this journey, on this path, I want to acknowledge you for investing in yourself by being in this program with me, in this method, I should say. It's not as much of a program as it is a method. And honor and remind you that you were meant to be here. You showed up, you signed up, you continue to watch the videos. Like this is synchronistic, as Deepak Chopra would say, okay? Or synchrodestiny, as he would say. So I'm honored to share the wisdom of my teachers with you. And my hope is that this practice and this method enrich your life and touch your heart and heals you and your lineage, your ancestral lineage and your lineage going forward. So I'll see you soon. Namaste. By the way, namaste means light in me recognizes the light in you, or the oneness in me, the divinity in me recognizes divinity in you. And I bow to that place inside of you that is connected to all things because it is also inside of me. Good to see you. I'll see you soon.